Hello YouTube viewers, welcome to my show Camera Tuesday. In today's episode, we're gonna take at the conclusion of all this mirrorless release. So we're gonna go at Nikon versus Canon. So let's dive right into it. Before we understand this Canon versus Nikon, we have to understand how the heck we ended up here. So first thing is stagnation. Nikon and Canon both has become so big that they were not innovating anymore. Like Canon cameras were like innovating, groundbreaking, and then it became just stagnant. And this happened with Nikon also. Nikon flat out ignored their flat out useless autofocus system in live view. They did not polish it. Like both Nikon and Canon, they were like, yeah, we are so big that we don't have to innovate, not polish. So basically, even though you can get great photos and make a living out of those cameras, it was not feeling like a new thing. It started to feel like a chore. You need new things in your life. Like if there is a new better camera, you will enjoy your work more, like, and you will upgrade every 5-6 years. You need new things. And if you use the same old camera for 10-20 years, first, only few people can do that. And why should you? Like, this is a consumer world. Give us good products. They did not. And then market crash happened. As you can see, this is the images that I'm showing you. They're stock images. They never peaked after 2007. Basically 2007, both of them, Canon and Nikon, both of them suffered idiotically after the crash, and after that they never reached the same basically power they used to hold over market in terms of finance. So after this, they invested heavily on diversifying their portfolio, and many of you know Canon jumped into movie cameras, and they did not have that much success, but this camera became kind of phenomenal in documentary industries, low budget indie filmmakers. So it did very good for Canon. And Nikon jumped into microscopes, large scale industrial optical equipments, including silicon manufacturing and things like that. So basically all these companies, first they were stagnating, then the market crash happened. After that market crash, they flat out diversified their portfolio, as it were. So this is on them. What happened to the outside world? First, the competition came into the market. Biggest competition to these companies were YouTube. Now you might say, how the heck that is a big deal? First of all, photographers were not taken very out of context ever. They were like, okay, wedding photographer, magazine photographer. They were never like, just photographer itself. YouTube allowed that to become a thing, like where people are just like me, just using a camera, and that's it. That's my job. So when this happened, when enough people started making money off of it, this became, the vlogging world became a reality. Now, Canon and Nikon, both of them were not taking it seriously. However, in that time, micro four third or four third sensor came into the market, which was using open lens architecture. Basically that sensor style is used on surveillance microscopes and other things like that. So it was kind of a predetermined industrial mount, so kind of an easy path. And Panasonic and Fuji, both of them just ran with it. They ran with it. Olympus also. And as you can see, these two camera, like, they were specifically competing with Canon and Nikon. So they, even though they had a smaller sensor, they flat out gave everything plus the kitchen sink. And Panasonic is known for that. You are talking about 4K 60 frame per second. They had it 2 years ago. Like, at this point, if you compete in terms of specification, in terms of what can be done in a camera, Panasonic is leading the charge. And if you're like, Fuji is also leading the charge in terms of color accuracy, which everybody who has used it, they say it's like almost better than Canon and Nikon. The only camera that is better than Fuji that I hear is Leica, but Leica cost an arm and a leg and a kidney and an eye. So yeah, I'm not going over that. So these things started to take a very new market. Basically, photographer was no longer just a photographer. Photographer is now a vlogger. They started to buying cameras. So they started to give money to this Panasonic and Fuji. And at this time, Canon and Nikon is like, okay, something's happening. This is the time when Nikon released their 1 series. Canon was still like, full frame, mirrorless is a joke. Now, Sony entered to the mess. Now, why Sony entered after the market crash? First, Sony's other division, as in Sony Corporation's divisions, were not making that much money, especially their movie department. As many of you know, they're flat out not producing good movies, so their profit there, zero. Their smartphone division almost evaporated. So at this point, Sony was kind of in a big trouble. Now they have already tried these things and it was not giving them money, so they went back to the camera. Now why I'm saying went back to the camera is simply because Sony was at one time or the another was providing sensor for Canon and Nikon. Now not every Nikon and Canon camera has Sony sensors, but Sony in terms of sensor technology was so advanced that they know how to make full frame sensors because they have provided the best sensors for Nikon. So when Sony entered the market, this changed everything, because before that they had this idea, okay, you don't have a shallow depth of field, you don't have like, you know, the full frame experience. The moment Sony entered the market, everything changed. At this point, things became serious. At this point, photographers started to like, yeah, yes, because these cameras were looked at toy, like, you know, lol camera, but this camera was serious. And not to mention Sony A3, which they were releasing that camera on almost no profit. They were like getting very little amount of profit, but the sole reason they did that is to simply capture the market, and they successfully did that. Last year, as in 2017, severely large amount of new full frame cameras were Sony. This is why Nikon and Canon is like, oh, okay, we have to, like, you know, release a competitor. That's why both of them have released unfinished camera. Basically, I don't think they were aiming to release in 2018. I think the camera was supposed to come out in 2020 or something like that. That's why the first time I'm hearing things like production, you know, not a production run, firmware updates. When was the last time you hear about firmware updates from Nikon or Canon? So Sony changed everything. So you have to also understand what position they were in. You have to look from their point of view. So first, they have very large old lens lineup, like this lenses. You are talking about at least 15 to 16 lenses are ready in any shop. Like you go to any good camera shop, they have 15-16 Canon lenses, they have 15-16 Nikon lenses minimum. And some big shops, like luxury shops, luxury as in like larger retailer chain, they could have upwards of 50, right? Of course, nobody has every single lens. That's why I'm saying 15, 16. And they have upwards of 300 lenses, as in like current live lenses. So they have a very large lens lineup. So throwing those things away is not acceptable for them. And not to mention, this is the reason why people get stuck into what they call ecosystem. Basically, your camera body is very cheap compared to these things. One of these lenses can cost upwards of $2,000, $10,000, $15,000. So, and I'm not even talking about like, you know, luxury lenses. These lenses, L glass and telephoto, and they are idiotically expensive. So you could find hundreds and thousands of photographers that have like, you know, one or two camera body, but they have like 6-7 lenses, and their lenses are more expensive than the camera body. So lens lineup was their greatest gift, but also their greatest curse. Is like, we can't just throw all that away. Then what the heck they're gonna do with their existing lineup, as in their DSLRs, as in Canon 5D, as in D800 series cameras, which is doing quite well. So they are in a kind of very tough position. We have a lineup which we will compromise if we release a very good jaw-dropping camera. We will compromise these things, and what we're gonna do with the lens. So let's see how Canon answered this. Now Canon, I really like the idea. They come up with the best adapter solution. Now Canon's new lenses, the L lenses, not L as in R lenses, they're gonna have an electronic ring which you can program whatever you want to do with it. As in, you can make it to so it controls the aperture, so it controls the ISO or exposure composition. So it's kind of awesome. But what about your old lenses? Canon is like, don't worry about it. Buy our adapter which has the electronic ring. And maybe you're like, okay, I don't like that electronic ring in a touchscreen camera. I don't really need that kind of settings. How about ND filters? Boom. This is a godsend for video photographer. But Canon being Canon, Canon is like in recent years, Canon started to being hated for the fact that they unnecessarily complicate their product lineup. Basically releasing camera where they should not release camera. The old way of the system was they will release a new camera, reduce the price of old camera, and that's how it was going, rather than starting to release very low end camera, like specifically D4000 4000D or something like that. That is so low end camera, as in the lens mount is plastic. So suffice to say, many people started to criticize Canon for this sort of aspect. Why you are making unnecessarily cheap things? Here also, why they made this, nobody knows. Like if you are making these two, imagine you did not had this in the market. And you might say, okay, these are expensive. Again, these are expensive because you are wasting your tooling, your production line capacity on producing this. Imagine if they had not made this, simply had these two, how would have people reacted? People were like, holy crap, if you buy a Canon adapter for your Canon system, every lens ends up with an electronic ring, or every lens ends up with a filter system. So they had awesome solutions, but they unnecessarily fragmented it. And even if this was like given in the box, it was like, let's say this is a very cheap, they are just gonna, you know, give it in the box, that would have been awesome, but they didn't do that also. So this is Canon, and this lenses, these things are so expensive. I have Canon 70 to 300 millimeter lens, new version, which has focus by wire and all that. It's a good lens, I'm happy with it. However, that lens, like that is 1 kg lens, is more cheap than these things. This is Canon. The Canon is like known for charging stupid amount of it. Now, Canon is also known for their autofocus. So this camera will give you the best autofocus out there. And they also added flip out screen, like one I'm using right now, 800D. So awesome. But Canon being Canon, they handicapped it. As in, that is the full frame sensor, and that red square, that's how much you will get in 4K. Basically, that is smaller than a Micro Four Third. Basically, flat out by Panasonic if you want to use 4K. They literally inherently sat down and it's like, yeah, let's just cripple our camera. Let's just not give that. Why? In my video about Canon, you can check out here, I specifically specified, because of their cine lineup, if they started to give everything they could give in this sort of camera, I'm not talking like, you know, magical features of like, you know, having XLR outputs and things like that, just the features they can inherently give, or basically made a Panasonic clone with full frame, they would have destroyed their own cine lineup. Because any documentary photographer, not every single one of them, but most of them will be like, yeah, I rather have few cheap lenses than few cheap cameras than one epic camera. Like multiple angle shots are always better looking than, you know, you having one super awesome lens. So for that reason, knowing full well that if they give everything out in the full frame camera, their cine camera will take a hit. Not everything will be destroyed, but it will take a hit. So protect their high-end lineup, they compromised it, they handicapped it. And not only that, they handicapped it in terms of single card slot. Basically, dual card slots at this point and this year is becoming like a statement. It's like a airbag system in your car. You're supposed to have it, especially for a camera that is costing more than $2,000. Sony, Panasonic, Fuji, even Nikon and Canon, their high-end cameras, DSLRs as in, all of them have this. They removed it just so the DSLR line does not get compromised, because the moment they had given that, people would have started using this, specifically Canon. The people have started flat out started using it in, you know, wedding and all that, but nobody buy their DSLR. So to protect that old lineup, not to protect their lenses lineup, to protect their DSLR, they did that. They handicapped the camera in two ways. First, dual card slot, and second, crop in 4K. So this is Canon. So I love the idea of the adapters they came out. However, everything other than that is just lame. Even in this adapter, why the heck this cost $400? Why? Now we come to Nikon. So Nikon did something interesting. Because Nikon does not have a cine lineup, they were kind of more free. And Nikon became the first camera in Canon versus Nikon debate to give you 4K full frame readout. So you got that. Nikon was like pushing it. However, just to protect their D800 lineup, they also handicapped this camera also, basically single slot. And most of you who will say like, okay, the card does not fit, why the heck their professional line, which uses this XQD card, why the heck they have dual card slot? It is a very necessary feature. Heck, even if you don't use it for, let's say, redundancy, you may want to use it for, you know, larger capacity, because card sizes are very expensive. If you want to go from 256 GB card to 512, the price is not double, price is 6 to 7 times more. So it's cheaper for you to have two cards, two lower capacity card, and you get, you know, what they call overflow setting, where you only use one card. Once it's full, you use second card. They could have done that, and they do that in their DSLR. If it was that safe, they would not have done that in their DSLR, but they do it. So inherently, they also handicapped their camera, and they give this weird flip out screen, which makes sense in Canon, in Nikon D800 series, simply because there are buttons on the side. So they can't actually have a hinge because they have to remove the buttons. But in this, there was no such thing. This literally looks like they copy pasted the hinge from D800. So they handicapped it, knowing full well, because if they have unlocked it, basically given a flip out screen or a dual cut slot, flat out nobody would buy D800. Even though it has better autofocus, better low light capability, the usability of the camera, like this camera versus that camera, would have been night and day. Everybody loves electronic viewfinder. So the full frame video is Nikon's best bet at this point, and the fact that it figured out in-body image stabilization. As you can see in this image, you have to understand lens image stabilization can only work in 2 axes. It does not matter how much supercomputer data you are putting into it. It still can handle only 2 axes, axis being X and Y. So for that reason, when everybody is saying like, oh, Canon has better image stabilization, it does not matter. It can only handle 2 axes. Now in-body image stabilization can handle few more axes. Basically it can make the sensor, like let's say this is a sensor, it can make the sensor go like this. That is which axis in this? That is roll axis. Then you have yaw axis, which, yeah, yaw is like this. Basically you go like this if your camera goes like that is yaw axis. And then you have pitch axis, which is like this. So basically these 3 axes, no matter what you do, you can't get from your lens. For that reason, IBIS is becoming more and more popular. And the fact that Sony did that IBIS thing in full frame, this changes the whole thing. So Nikon, I'm more happy that Nikon got IBIS, because giving a flip out screen is much easier. Giving a dual cut slot is much easier than creating IBIS technology. So suffice to say, if I have to put my money on, I am hopeful that Nikon can, because they don't have cine lineup to protect, they may give us a better camera in next generation. But for that you have to wait 3 years. So current state of things, not good. Basically at this point, flat out you have to buy Sony, and that's why I'm not considering their lenses, because if you are gonna buy a new lens setup, buy Sony. Flat out, just buy if you have old lenses, you have to use adapters. That's why I was focusing on adapters, and Nikon adapter has no fancy things. And flat out, they were not also packing it up with a box where it's like, buy this and you get the adapter free. So I'm really not happy with the fact, because they were crippling their own camera. They were like, we're just gonna give you as little as we can. So for that reason, I'm kind of disappointed as a consumer. And as you can see, I am actually relying on this to make a living out of it. So I'm really not happy with this, how the things turned out. So this was my presentation. I hope you liked it or learned from it. In that case, please leave a like. If you didn't, dislike it. And I would suggest you leave a comment what you want to see in the next episode of Camera Tuesday. And please subscribe, press the bell icon if you are free. And as always, thanks for watching.